Guillermo, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great, thanks. And you?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Excellent. I'm just going to take some time to admit some few people who are just joining the Zoom chat right now. And Guillermo, are you having any issues hearing me at all?
No, I can hear you great. Can you
Perfect.
hear me?
And yeah, you sound fantastic
Sweet.
as well.
Awesome.
And as people are joining this webinar or this sort of interactive educational series, we want to welcome everybody. Welcome to Wavelength Presents Live Streaming 101. We're joined with Guillermo Subauste, or Subauste. How do I say it correctly?
Subauste. The last
Subauste.
is, yeah, it's Spanish, it's weird.
No, not weird at all. Just wanted to make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly. So,
Thank you.
Guillermo Subauste, I'll let you speak a little bit about yourself, but just to introduce you to the audience here, you are currently a Toronto-based recording producer, engineer, mix engineer, mastering engineer, and your resume is fairly extensive in the music industry, including doing a lot of live sound and on stage tech as well. Um, and just so people know, my name is Pothik Karim. I'm a member of the board of directors at Wavelength Music, and very excited to be hosting this session with Guillermo. And the goals of this session really are to provide foundational advice, tips and tricks, and really help elevate everyone's ability to live stream in an effective way to reach and connect to their audience, especially the in the age of COVID-19. So, Guillermo, before we get started with that aspect of things, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and where you come from and how you find yourself here today?
Right. Well, thanks for the introduction. I'm, as you said, a recording engineer, producer as well. I have a studio here in the city in Toronto. And I've been working doing this for about 20 years now, basically with the first band I started playing in. Um, I've also gone on tour several times doing front of house or monitors as well. So after a couple of years working at the BAMF Center, where I was able to also work in the studio and learn a bit more about production and also live events and yeah, basically show production in general. I found myself that in Toronto, worked for a few big studios here, like Revolution Recording, did some teaching as well at places like Recording Arts Canada, while at the same time doing live sound with the Sadies and having my own studio. As things progressed, I've been, making the studio bigger every time I got kicked out by condos being developed and whatnot. I'm currently working in one in the Danforth. And as this whole thing started about maybe 2 years ago, I got a bit more involved in video and realized that I was able to, yeah, to connect some of the nice cameras I had gotten for taking photos and doing video as well to the computer. And then that got me thinking that maybe I could also stream or basically output what I was mixing from the control room and make it sound as good as that, which was not the case with some of the live streaming I had seen before the whole COVID-19 thing started. Um, so I did a few shows that way. I called it Pacha sessions then, which is like Earth sessions. Pacha is a Quechuan word that means Earth. My studio, the one at Danforth, I call it Pacha Sound, and um, and then yeah, once this thing hit us, I realized that a few bands were starting to have to cancel the shows they had. My band included. We had a couple of shows that week, very same week they had to cancel. um, they were going to need a place to do this show. So since I already had the infrastructure in place and the know-how, I decided to offer that as an option as well. I did 4 shows that week with Misha Brewer-Gossman, who's a soprano that I've recorded before. I had just finished mixing her album, and I've drummed for her on the road as well. Um, but yeah, she came to Toronto, and we did 4 shows at my studio, and then one more um, with the people. I forget the name of the company, but I'm sure someone will remind me in a second. But they took care of all the video part, and they did have a bit of a bigger video crew with like multiple moving cameras and a lot of things that I had not yet implemented for myself. So then after that happened, then social distancing got even more strict, and I had a few shows that I had to cancel that were going to happen in my studio with like Ben Kunder or Sarah Sleen as well. So then I helped them remotely. I realized that there were ways for me to control their computer remotely, and rather than on the phone trying to tell them exactly everything I was going to do, I was able to do it myself. Same thing for mixing and recording. I've been able to do most of that now from my house, and still be able to put out songs with different artists that way. But then for the streaming part, I realized that I could set up things the way I had set them up at my studio, but be able to control other people's computers that way as well. So I started a company called Stream TuneUp, and that's what I've been. That's the branding I've been using for these services. And with that, I've been able to work with a lot of the side door access artists like Stars. Um, or Said the Whale, and yeah, different artists that I had not worked with yet, that needed kind of the same service. So as these things have progressed, now I'm finding myself in a place where I'm able to now offer the platform for bands to have a paywall, which is something that so far has been a bit harder because Zoom is great, but there's a lot of things that don't work really that well with it when it comes to monetizing events. But we've been able to figure out a way to offer that to smaller players. Like a lot of these bigger companies, like the Cast or Vimeo Enterprise or Bright Cove, for example, have plans that are sometimes like $24,000 a year, and you have to sign up for a 2-year program. So they work mostly with companies like ESPN or HBO or like bigger or Netflix, like bigger companies that work subscription based or pay-per-view. So sort of what I'm doing now with them is being the middle person basically. So I'll be able to connect a lot of the smaller bands, which some of them might have 100 or 200 people that could come watch the show and still be able to stream either with me doing it remotely, or we've also we've built a smaller version now, but are in the process of building a bit of a mobile streaming solution, so that for some events where we can go and still keep distancing and everything, we'll be able to come with the cameras and stream, with paywalls or to Facebook or YouTube or whatever other solution they have. Sorry, that
Okay.
was a really long introduction.
No, that's great because it actually laid a lot of groundwork. It set a lot of foundational things that we'll explore during this talk. And I definitely want to come back to um, controlling the stream remotely or engineering remotely and how that might work. Um, and because I think that would be of value to more than a few people that are here in this talk or watching us now. But before we get into, I would say that's a more professional um, avenue of executing live streaming. We want to talk about, our audience is mostly independent musicians. And with the ability to play live basically being removed for the foreseeable future, at least especially these small club shows that so much of the artists that we deal with rely on. We talk about a lot of artists have embraced live streaming as a creative outlet, and in some cases a revenue generator. You mentioned Side Door, which is a platform that allows artists to actually charge a ticket price for an online show. And just, I know I don't mean to take away from your what you have to offer, but just in case people are unaware, Side Door actually started as sort of an independent venue booking service where they allowed people to basically host shows in their homes or other unconventional venues. They use Side Door as the sort of booking mechanic where they can book the artist and then also encourage an audience to come. But during COVID-19, Side Door has pivoted to this virtual model where basically artists are able to stream from their home studios or their remote locations. They use Side Door as a ticketing platform. People register and pay a ticket price that's set by the artist. And that is sort of like a pay gate that once you pay the ticket price, you get the login information or the password information to access the stream. So that's also something that's available to artists. But once again, this is also an echelon of artists that might be just outside of the people that we are catering to today, which are really independent musicians who may not even have home studios. They may have instruments and a few microphones, quite probably a laptop, hopefully a webcam. So with that in mind, can we start with the absolute foundational basics of what you think an artist would need at home, what hardware, in order to execute at least a quality live stream?
Well, from just the sound perspective or the video perspective, the thing with video, for example, your phone has a great camera in it already, right? So there are ways to get the video part really like looking great. Again, the camera on the phone or even like the webcam camera is not the best camera, but with good lighting, you can definitely make it change quite a bit.
And actually,
For
sorry, if I may, sorry, just to stop you there for a moment. So yeah, just so people know that in case they're unaware, most smartphones made in the last 3 to 4 years have 4K cameras on their capable, and that is a great video asset. So I didn't mean to cut you off. Just make sure
yeah.
make that note.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, these cameras have these phones have amazing cameras. Like they're way better than some of the digital cameras that you have from like, from like the same year or a few years ago. So that would be number one, right? I find that some people realize that they might already have DSLRs, like, a bit bigger cameras, and you don't know how to connect it to your computer. So I would say that one of the best things you can get is a capture card. This is a device that converts HDMI, which is the signal that comes out of your DSLR camera, to USB or Thunderbolt if you want to go the Black Magic route. It starts getting a bit more expensive as you go, but then this way you can connect the video feed from your camera to the computer.
Great. Sorry, keep going if you. I didn't mean to cut you off.
As for the sound part, the microphone on a lot of these phones, they're not bad. They're very compressed, so they make it so that even the quietest noise get amplified quite a bit. So unfortunately, if there's a lot of percussive things, your audio is just going to get completely squished, which might not be a bad thing depending on what you're trying to do. But definitely getting an interface is good. For some people, that might be just a USB microphone, and if you're doing mostly spoken word, you don't really need anything more than that.
So something like a podcasting microphone.
Yeah, a podcasting microphone works great. The only thing that makes the difference in my case is the fact that I use Loopback, which is a software that works for Mac, and it allows you to connect the audio output of an application that can be GarageBand or Audacity or Pro Tools or Cubase or whatever, Logic, Ableton. And you're able to send that to the stream. So instead of the microphone going directly there, you're able to EQ it a little bit, right? So you can cut some low end so it's not popping the whole time. You can increase or decrease the high end so that it's less harsh or more present, and you're able to compress it as well. So that's also a huge improvement over just going with the microphone connected to that.
And if I may expand on that a little bit, so let's talk about common issues, I guess, with the onboard microphones that you have in smartphones. And getting sorry, we're getting a note in the chat that my voice is louder than Guillermo. Guillermo, do you have a tip on how I can adjust my microphone?
Well, I can just make mine louder. How's that?
That works, and I can also see that my input level is a little high, so I'm going to take that right down. Here we go. Guillermo, how do I
Thank you.
sound now?
You sound great. I was hearing you great before.
Okay,
Too.
excellent. I'm just going to adjust the output and input volume here. So yeah, let's talk about, I guess, the things to watch out for onboard microphones, whether on the laptop or the smartphone. You touched on this, so they're highly compressed. And go
Yeah,
ahead.
they're highly compressed, and in the case of computers, they also give another problem, which is the fact that because they're going to be picking up a lot of the just like ambient noise. If you're using a laptop and it's an older laptop and it has a fan and the fan increases in noise, all this stuff just keeps building up. That's a bit easier to disguise with a separate microphone that you can have at a certain distance from the computer, right? That way you can just change the orientation basically. Or with the phones is a problem because the image is where the microphone is, but there are microphones that you can get that work with iPhones. You just connect them through the Lightning connection, and there's also even interfaces that you can use to connect more than one microphone. My only problem with that solution, however, is that you can't really EQ and compress the audio, which again is an improvement of at least 50% from just using the audio directly with no effects, right? So that's why I always recommend, if you can, do the streaming from your computer so that you're able to process the audio a bit more and make it just a bit more mastered, basically.
So yeah, and just to recap then, it's use an outboard microphone, even a microphone that connects by USB,
Yeah.
and going into an audio program like GarageBand or Audacity or something along those lines where you have control over the EQ.
EQ and compression are the two main that are going to help you, get better levels. And also, like if you end up getting more than one instrument, let's say that now I want to sing and play guitar at the same time. It would be better to get an interface that has two inputs and then have one microphone for each of those, one for the guitar, one for my vocal. And then I will be able to adjust the balance between these two different microphones from the program itself. Again, the DAW you're using. Or, for example, add reverb to some of them and only have them throughout the song, but then mute them in between songs. That's kind of the work I do remotely, but a lot of artists don't have any problem doing it themselves, and I help them set that up, and then they're ready to go.
Excellent. And before we continue, I do want to encourage anybody who's watching right now to participate in the chat. Please send us your own questions, and I'll try to keep track of them in the chat window, and we can get Guillermo to answer those directly as well. By no means am I the only one that has questions about how to go about this the best. So Guillermo, I do, even staying on these basic things, what do you recommend in terms of internet connection? What is the basic broadband speed that's required to deliver a quality live stream?
Well, I mean, if you can connect the streaming device, in this case, computer, to the modem or the router, that's usually the best way to go. Like it
So
has to go.
a wired connection.
Wired is way better. For example, in my house, the computer is right next to the router, but using just Wi-Fi, I probably do like 30 megabits per second download and like maybe 8 or 9 upload, and it sort of works okay. There's sometimes some glitches. If I'm using Zoom and also doing like control remote in someone's computer, it starts getting a bit weird. But when I connect it, I get 150 up and something like maybe 40 or 50. Sorry, 150 down and 30 or 40 up, and it works fine. I haven't had any issues. But for example, I did some shows at the Woodshed, and they have something like 500 up, 500 down, and like it's great. It's great.
Yes.
Obviously, the more you can get is the better. But I find that with anything over like, if you can do like 60 and like 10 or something like that, you'll be fine if you can get to those numbers. But at the same time, I know Ben Kander, for example, he does his streams from his garage, and he doesn't have Wi-Fi there, so he tethers he uses the computer, but he's tethering the connection from his phone, and or Misha is in the East Coast, and in rural areas, the farther you're from the city, the harder it is to get reliable internet, and it works. It's not it can get a bit jittery sometimes, but again, the more you can do, the better it is. But I don't think it's necessarily a deal breaker, or like you should feel discouraged because you can't get the fastest. I think that it's just a matter of like, maybe you don't do 1080 streams, but you do 720, or you just keep lowering the resolution to have, it's just finding the sweet spot that works for each of you.
Well, I think you gave a very excellent tip, which is if you are at home on Wi-Fi, if you can plug directly into your modem with an Ethernet cable.
Oh yeah, it's like 5 times faster, both in my Mac Mini and the MacBook Pro as well.
And that's without upgrading your internet package,
Yeah,
basically. Yeah.
same. It might be that I don't have the right router. I don't know, but that's what I'm encountering here.
No, I think that's a very important tip because I think people sometimes, in the age of Wi-Fi, people sometimes forget that wired connections even exist, and
Right.
that and any gamer will tell you, a serious gamer will tell you they use a wired controller. They don't use the wireless controller. It cuts down on lag time and it makes your connection much more secure.
Yeah, I guess on that note, another tip I like to give is that a lot of newer computers don't have Ethernet ports.
Right.
So you need to get an adapter, whether it's Thunderbolt or USB. But then you're going to encounter the problem that you're probably running out of inputs right now to like any USB ports, basically. If you have one of the newer computers, the Mac, you probably only have one or two. Windows is sort of starting to go that way, but I would recommend getting hubs and getting hubs that are powered as well, because if you're using an interface like a Focusrite or even the microphone, it requires some energy in order to function. And if you have a hub that just goes connected to USB and there's no connection to the wall, like to the AC, that means that it doesn't start. I think it starts just consuming all the bandwidth and not being able to operate well. I've seen people having disconnections from their interfaces because of this power problem with the USB ports.
Yeah, and I think that not to speak somewhat unqualified opinion, but that's one of the reasons why professional studios will have line conditioners and power conditioners, is to provide a stable supply of non-interfered power. Unless that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, the ones that you can power from the wall, definitely do it that way.
Okay. We do have a question in the chat. Chris, we see your question. I'm just going to table it for a moment while we go through some more, I guess, basics. Speaking of, so we covered a little bit of audio. I know that you are a recording engineer by trade, but do you have tips on visuals in terms of lighting and how to position cameras or frame yourself in order to maximize the visual impact of your live stream?
Right. Well, the stuff I've learned has all been from tutorials online and like any literature or like manuals from the programs that I started using. I at the same time this whole thing started, I sort of became a video editor because a project I was working on that had 150 singers from different places. I had to mix the audio part, and I finished the audio, and then someone else was in charge of the video company, and they weren't able to finish it. So I had to sort of jump into that. And I was lucky that I had just gotten an external graphic card because my computer wouldn't have been able to process 150 little squares of video and audio. But yeah, what I learned from those mistakes, again, from having to crop a lot of people that didn't record the right way. I gained like 10 years of experience just from having to spend, several minutes getting carpal tunnel from editing people. But yeah, I would say make sure the lighting is good, and with that, what I've learned from that is that it's good to have three different sources. Like the thing is called like 3-point lighting, and basically means having a light at the front, right? Then having one that's coming from the side, which you'll see that it changes how the shadows in your face look, and it just makes you look like less angry a little bit as well. And then the other one is to have, yeah, and then the other one is to have some lighting in the back as well, which allows the camera to look a bit deeper, basically. Like it separates you from the background. If the background is being lit only by the light you have at the front, then it just becomes, it's almost like it makes it two-dimensional. By adding the light in the back or other different items or things that you have that make it look different as well, and you're wearing something different too, so that you're not like mimetized to the background. All those things help a little bit. Also, make sure that if you're a violin player, for example, this happened with one of the projects I just finished. They didn't like they had a good frame for their heads and where they were in, but then every time they would just move their bow hand, it was just completely out of the frame. So you could only see their left hand or right hand if they were lefties. But yeah, those are some things to consider. A lot of them you'll realize that are almost common sense, but you do almost need to make these mistakes in order to see it,
Absolutely. And another thing I can just recommend to everyone is there's a lot of sort of film lighting tutorials on YouTube that you can take those principles and apply. Guillermo, you were speaking about basically having a key light, a fill light, and then sort of like a background light.
Yes, thank you.
And those are things you can achieve with what you have at home. It might mean bringing extra lamps into your room. And making sure that a strong light source, like you can see, I have basically got a halo behind my head. That's because I have too strong of a light source behind me. But I'm also facing an open window, and I have a couple of other lamps on. And I think, and tell me if you agree with me or not, but more light is better than less.
Yeah,
as a rule
totally.
of thumb.
Totally. Yeah. Cameras definitely like light a lot better than darkness. You'll find that they can they get grainy, they start introducing noise, and then in the streaming you can also start getting weird things with the places that are too dark,
Right. And but all that is to say that once you understand what lighting can do for your video, you can get creative with it. And like you can uplight yourself for dramatic shadow. You can use different colored lights or an experiment, but to always have control over your visual aesthetic and what you're putting in front of the camera. And that is understanding what lighting does for your camera or to your video. We do have we have a couple of technical questions in the chat that I want to get to, specifically about audio. So Chris is asking about, basically it's about self-monitoring when you're streaming. So he says, how can you hear yourself in real time if you're playing along with tracks and monitor the stream, just in case there's a lag or other sort of interference?
Right. Well, okay. So in the case of actually, you can do this on Windows and Mac as well. In Windows, the advantage you have is that using Reaper, which is a DAW that's awesome. It has a lot of really cool stuff. I don't use it personally, but I have it, and I've tried it a few times. But the advantage that Reaper has is that it allows you to do the connection that Loopback does on a Mac. The problem with Loopback is that it costs $100 American, so it's a bit expensive, but it allows you to connect two apps between each other. So what you would be monitoring is the output of Pro Tools, for example. So I'm a band, and I'm hearing as if I were recording just the same. Just like you're not hearing the voice that you're hearing on your headphones is coming directly from Pro Tools itself. And then So sorry, in the preferences of Zoom, you would select the microphone to be Loopback, which again is this virtual sound card you're creating, and then you connect the output of Pro Tools or Logic to this virtual sound card that is Loopback. That's the microphone that you select in Zoom, and the speaker in Zoom is going to be your interface. So you're hearing yourself coming back from your DAW, and you're hearing Zoom's people like talking and all the people that are in there just directly through Zoom to the interface. The lag is not really that easy. Sorry, it's not noticeable because I'm hearing the latency from my DAW itself. I'm not hearing myself coming back from Zoom. That would be a lot later, and it would definitely mess you up. But it works for what we're doing here.
Excellent. And I see a related question from Debashish or Debashis on Mac Black Hole. It says Mac Black Hole is useful. Have you used it? It's not as easy as Loopback.
I downloaded it. I tried it. I probably spent maybe a couple of hours figuring it out. I had used Soundflower in the past, and it was free and it was great. Actually, I think that Soundflower got bought by the people from Loopback, or they're the same people, I forget. But because I got it working after a couple of hours, something happened next time that required a lot of configuration. I figured that at that point, $100. I tried Loopback, and yes, it's kind of the same thing between using the Cast and Vimeo. One of them is 5 times more expensive, but it's a lot easier to use, and the interface and it's all there, and you know, it's a bit, it allows me to not have to worry about having to reconfigure things every time I'm there. I have different virtual sound cards, one that has the output of Pro Tools, another one that has the output of Tidal if I want to play some music from there or from a browser. Like, it's just a lot easier. And then I ended up getting a lot of their products as well, like Hijack, I think, is another one. And like, they have a lot of like cool toys that I played with and I really enjoyed. So that's why I ended up going with Loopback.
Excellent. And another related question from Mike. He says, Guillermo, we're about to do a live stream using OBS in which we're running our mics through Logic so we can process the audio. In your experience, how does that affect the lag times?
Well, that's what I'm doing right now. So I have my camera going to OBS, and I have the audio going to Pro Tools from my interface, and then from Pro Tools goes to Loopback. Loopback goes to OBS, and then in Zoom, for example, to do this, I'm using NDI, which is virtual. It's basically a virtual camera that you can make so that in Zoom you can select it as a mic, as a camera, but also as an audio input and output. That way you keep the sync sort of okay between those two. I could have also selected the input to be Loopback itself in Zoom, but I was worried that maybe because one of them is going through OBS and the other one isn't, there would be a bit of a lag. But again, just selecting that to be the input on your streaming end works best, I find.
And for my edification, since I don't know, what is OBS?
Right. I can show you, actually. Can I share my screen?
Absolutely. I'm not sure if let's see. You should be able to share your screen now.
Awesome. So everyone sees that console kind of window?
Yep.
Okay. So let me show you. What was the question one more time? Sorry.
I was just wondering what OBS is. I didn't know.
Oh, yeah. Right. Sorry. I opened Loopback and I got completely distracted. So this is OBS. It's open broadcast software, I think is what the initials go for. And it's basically a studio, right? So here you select sources, right? I have an audio source, which, as I was saying, it's Loopback, right? And Loopback, as you see, has Pro Tools as a source, and that's going into the virtual sound card, and my voice is going directly to Pro Tools, right? And then I'm also using Universal Audio Interface, so I have a Neve preamp on the microphone I'm using, and I'm also hitting the distressor a little bit for some compression. And then, yeah, all that stuff goes to OBS, which is this software. I have an audio source, and I also have a video source, which is this one. But you can also create scenes, and each of those scenes can have different views. So, for example, this second scene, you can see this whole like crazy thing now, but it has my screen being shared and also my camera in it. And as you can see, the sources has the audio source, the video capture source, and now a display capture, which is capturing the second screen, which is why now you're seeing visual feedback, basically. But if I were to create another scene, for example, sorry, you probably stopped hearing me there.
It was
But
a
that's,
very subtle fade. It was nice.
oh yeah, it's because I have a duration of 800 milliseconds here.
Fantastic.
But like, look, I'm gonna go to scene 3, and you're not gonna be able to hear me for a second. But I'll change it to I'll add the audio source.
Okay. So it's changing the camera view, adding a new audio source, or adding the same audio source to the camera view.
Yeah. So this is the audio source. Now you can hear me, but you can't see me, right?
Right.
So then I would add a video capture device, and that device is going to be this one, which is the one I had already open, and you can see it there. So then you just transform it, you fit to screen, then it's there. And then from here is that I would be able to put, like what streaming software I'm going to add the stream key, which is something that you get from the service that you're using, either
Right.
Facebook or YouTube or whatever. You can also select the quality of the stream, your audio devices, and the quality of the video that you're going to be outputting. You can also use like MIDI controls to change the scenes, for example, so that you can jump from sharing something to going to a different screen. Or also you can add other video sources. For example, right now I have another camera, but it's a webcam, and you'll see that all the magic is gone if I add it. For example, if I go there and it's a new one, when I open this, it's going to ask from where you want to get it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you see that there's a cam link, which is where I have this image from the Sony. And then there's this one, which is a webcam that, it just shows you that I'm in a basement right now.
This is also a fantastic example of framing and what framing does for your live stream.
Right. Yeah, it's a
Right.
big difference for sure. Like, and the lighting changes as well. That's a Logitech HD 1080. It's still better than the built-in camera, but because I wasn't working on making that one look good, oh, sorry, that's not it. It looks that way. But again, this is all I need to be able to talk the way I'm talking. So.
And may I ask, is OBS an open source software, or is it a paid program?
No, it's free. It's
Amazing.
free, and it's free, and there's an incredible like forum where you can basically get any answer to anything. Like today, I learned how to send OBS to Zoom in 5 minutes. This is like Matrix stuff where you want to learn kung fu, and then you just have to watch a tutorial for 5 minutes and you get it. Like right away you can find whatever question you have, and you're able to do overlays. I can do transitions between the scenes. I've helped, for example, a few people that were doing events that were maybe 5 hours long. So then a scene would be maybe a pre-recorded video that a band sent you, right? And then you just go to that scene like this. Right, and you let it play, and then once the video plays, then you go to your own camera, and then that's the live part, and so on. And all you need to do is just press down or up to go through the scenes. So once you have it all programmed, then you're good to go.
So that's a way of sort of incorporating pre-recorded elements into your live stream to help
Yep.
sort of switch up the flow and add some visual interest, and actually program perhaps like an actual program, not to use the same word twice. So just to encapsulate, I think we learned a lot in that little bit. So I just wanted to sort of put it in a nutshell, which is OBS, which is an open source studio software, will basically let you select and mix different visual or camera sources along with different audio sources, including different microphones or pre-recorded elements, right?
Exactly.
And then you can feed that directly out to a streaming service, such a, really, it looks like it has a number of streaming services that are compatible.
Yeah, the only thing though is that it can only send to one stream at a time.
right?
However, then there's services like Caster or Restream. I personally use Caster. It's like $15 or $12 a month, I think. But what it allows you to do is receive this streaming key, and then from there you can send it to Facebook, YouTube, and as many as you want, really. So then you're streaming or simulcasting the event.
And that is an amazing way to capture more people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We do have a few more questions in the chat. One is about, a lot of comments about the quality of your video right now. So they'd like to know what camera you're using as your main view here. And then we have a question about capture cards and what you would recommend using with a DSLR camera that's going to PC with Windows.
Right. Okay, so the camera I have is a Sony A6500. The lenses are...
So that's a DSLR camera, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a DSLR, so you can change the lenses on it, and the I forget what the SLR stands for. Someone told me last time.
Single lens reflex.
Yes, thank you. But I'm in the process of. They're arriving tomorrow. I have to pick them up. But I'm getting a couple of Blackmagic Pocket 4K and also an ARSA, which is a bigger like broadcast camera, to try it out, that one, just to be able to give a bit more, like basically to make the image even better. I find these Sonys are great, but there's a few things that are not, like, they're not made to be video cameras, DSLRs for the most part. So in the case of the Sony one, you have to hack it to break the 30-minute restriction for recording. Now, you don't need to do that if you're just streaming. Right now, that camera is not recording. It has an internal card, but I'm just displaying the output of it like photographers would to look at the photos they're just taking for reference, right? So battery life, it's great. It lasts almost like over an hour, I would say. I just did a show with Jim Cuddy where we were using also a Sony 6000, not the 6500, and the battery, the same batteries, it lasted maybe something like 25 minutes or something like that. So I'm happy that I have the 6500, but I find the Blackmagics are going to be a bit more interesting. And then apart from the camera itself, is also the lenses that you put on it. You know, in the case of this one, I think it's a 35 mil, and it's a something Magic, Cinemagic or something like that. I bought it from a friend who's a photographer, and I've liked it a lot because it gives me a very, very like shallow depth of field, and I can use it for more close-ups, and it blurs the background really well. So I find it works really well for that. But I also have another lens that's the 12 milliliter that milliliter, yeah. No, sorry, millimeter. My bad. That is able to get a bit like wider image. So, for example, when I do recordings at the studio, I'm able to grab everyone in the shot, even if they're separated by 2 meters each. And then I have the other two cameras with, with more like close-up looks, just so that I can be switching between those and keep it a bit more dynamic.
And you feed that multi-camera setup into OBS, and it's easy to switch through, correct?
Well, sort of. The problem is that going to the capture card, the one I have is a Camlink Elgato card. That's what I bought like 2 years ago, and it's the one I was recommending to most people when this whole thing started. But then it turns out that they're pretty much sold out everywhere. It's a bit hard to get them, but there's a lot of them on Amazon, Best Buy. They have different capture cards. As long as it says that it can do 1080, sure, 4K is nice, but some
can barely display 4K.
Yeah, they can display it, and then it's going to use a lot more bandwidth. You're fine with 1080. So as long as the capture card can do 1080 and that it says that it works for both Mac and PC, you're fine. Now, obviously, in my case, I have only one of them. So what I do is that the cameras are now going to a switcher. A switcher is a device that captures the output of the cameras either through HDMI or SDI, and then they go, and then you're able to change the camera feed from there. And then it only has one output, and that output goes to this capture card. So then OBS only gets one feed, and then you're able to do the control from the switcher. Now, I'm using OBS right now because I don't have the other cameras connected at the moment. They're at the studio. And it's only the webcam, which is connected through USB. But if all your cameras are connected through USB, then yes, you can do the switching through OBS itself, and you don't need a switcher for that.
Okay, and I think that also answered Pierre's question here about which video capture cards you would recommend. Just to recap, you're saying as long as it's 1080p and it can work with both PC and Windows, you're basically good to go with what you can afford.
Yeah, yeah. There's some that are like, they start at like maybe 40 or 50 bucks and they work fine. I think this one cost me 150 when I got it, and they're going for over 200 now, I think. And then obviously if you go the Blackmagic route, some of them can be over $1,000 or $2,000 for some of them.
Okay, and we have a few other questions here. One of them I think is pretty simple, but has a lot of possibilities, which is what's the best setup for solo singers singing to tracks? And those tracks are coming through or played back through GarageBand.
Well, if you're on Mac, which I'm guessing you are, then I would say, yeah, probably Loopback, and from Loopback you can get the output of GarageBand, which would have your vocal live. You would just have to leave it armed or input monitored, and then the tracks would be, you could just have them sequentially, which is what I would do, or do what some of the artists I'm working with are doing, which is have them in separate tracks and then have them all muted, and then just unmute the one that you want to use, and then you press play and it plays, and it always goes back to the beginning. So you mute that one and go to the next one. I like it sequentially because then I can see past, present, and future rather than things stacked. When things are stacked, I'm always scared that I'm gonna unmute more than one at the same time, and it's gonna be really loud and distorted. But whatever works for you.
Okay. And then we're asking for, well, we have a very technical question and then a sort of general tips and tricks. So I'm going to start with the technical one. Have you tried going straight from the UAD console to Loopback instead of using a digital audio workstation? And if so, does it work well?
Yeah, I tried. It was not as straightforward. Loopback does, console does show us an option in Loopback, but you don't get audio right away. It's kind of the same thing with Pro Tools HD, actually. And I think it has to do with how the audio comes back to your ears with less latency. Like this zero latency they do actually messes up the insert point as to where Loopback takes its signal from. So you have to get a bit creative with that. And the other reason why I don't do that is because I usually run my channels through some mix bus effects as well. I might have an EQ or a bit of a compressor on the mix bus too, and console doesn't let you have effects on the mix bus. You can only have effects on each independent channel. So this allows me to sort of master it a bit more before it goes out.
Excellent. And then in a more general sense, David has asked if you can share some tips and tricks on using compression, or I assume applying compression to optimize live streaming.
It's hard because compression is one of those things that relate to audio that I would say take the longest for people to hear the differences. I would say trying to do it with simple compressors. There's compressors that have a lot of different functions like attack and release, and for those your ears have to be developed to a place where you can hear those things, and you know that maybe what you're playing, if you're like playing guitar but it's very strummy, that's going to make for a different attack and release settings. Or if it's more like velvety, then different instruments are going to have different sounds. So I would say just experiment, or else stick to easier compressors, usually like something like an LA2 or a Fairchild 660, although that one has a couple of timing knobs, but basically something that only has input and output, so that you feed it more input and then you lower the output so that you're compressing the signal in the middle and reducing your dynamic range, basically. And that I find works well for streams, because anything that's too quiet, I find that sometimes I start getting kind of jittery, right? So it's the same thing they do with FM, and that's why radio sounds so compressed, is because they want to raise this floor so that it's farther from the noise floor, and then you're sending a more robust signal. So again, do it, like, don't be scared of getting some gain reduction, but also if you're getting like -20 and it's just stuck there the whole time, it's probable that it's over compressed, and it'll be pumpy, a bit too pumpy, and rather than sounding bigger, it's going to start sounding smaller, actually.
Okay, well, it looks like what I thought was a complicated question was a simple one, and the simple one was a little more complicated. Which speaks to my understanding of compression, at least. We have a rather specific question, it looks like, from MB, asking if you need to switch back and forth when you're mixing on your DAW, and then when you're on Zoom or OBS.
Well, it depends. For in my case, I have 2 monitors, so I'm able to put things in a way that everything is displayed at all times. I also put them side by side, so that Command Tab always drops me to the next app, and I'm just switching through them pretty quick. Or else, if I'm doing a stream that's a bit more complicated, what I do is program the scene changes, and then put them on something like this is a Stream Deck, for example, is this USB device that has buttons that you can program different changes from OBS, so you can remote control it, and I can have this. Or if it's for sound things, for example, you can have an 8-channel, like Huey or Yukon controller for Pro Tools, or your device. You can get, like, Behringer ones makes something, ones that are less than $200, I think, and you get 8 faders. So there's different ways of making it so that you don't have to touch the computer without getting, without having to spend $5,000 or $6,000 in like professional controllers,
Great, and we are coming close to the end of time, but there are a few things that we want to touch on. One of them is, what are the benefits, or what, for instance, is your preferred streaming platform, if you have one, or what are the strengths and weaknesses of the various platforms that are available to us?
Well, so Facebook is the one that has like biggest reach for fans, I find, at least in my world. Instagram is really good too, but the problem with Instagram is that in order to stream on it from a computer, you need to use Yellow Duck and other software, and it's always portrait, not landscape, so it's never going to look as great, I find. But
also,
again,
one hour time limit on Instagram.
Right, the 1 hour time limit as well. Twitch is great. I find that it doesn't work for some of the bands I work with, mainly because it's like very gamey, like there's everything. Most of it is about games. Obviously, I think that Mouse has a channel there and he's doing really well, and you can accept subscribers and donations and all that stuff. So it's really well done for that, but there's so many like diamonds and things you can give away as gifts that I find a lot of people just get turned off by that. YouNow is another one that they use in the States quite a bit, similar fashion. And then, yeah, the private ones are the ones that I would say look the best, but you need to make an investment in order to get those, for sure.
And since we are using Zoom, and Zoom has become rather ubiquitous in our COVID-19 environment, what are benefits and detractions from using Zoom, and how can you overcome some of those challenges?
Right. Well, the advantage of Zoom is that it's the one that requires you to make the least investment to start with and have something where you can charge and have tickets and all that stuff. Obviously not directly, you're doing it through kind of like a side way. But you're able to see people as well. As a bit more interactive from that sense. You already get a chat function, like a lot of things that are very expensive if you go with other routes. The audio has improved from when I started using it, which is maybe a year ago or less than that, I think, or however many months. I've lost track of time now. But the problem with it, though, is that the audio quality is not as great as YouTube, for example. I find that YouTube is the one that sounds the best out of the one I've mentioned. Facebook it follows. Sometimes it creates the stereo file. It makes it into a mono file for some people, depending on their speed. And that's not great if you weren't checking for phase, because you're going to have phase cancellations. Yeah, and then Zoom, for example. Zoom, WebEx, what's the other one? Google Meetups, like they all are not made for music necessarily, so they are going to have some problems again, especially when the music is not as loud. So when you finish the last chord on the guitar, the tail it's never going to be as you hear it on your headphones when you're recording. When you hear it back, you'll see what the compression is doing to the audio.
So basically, the dynamic range is limited on Zoom and other sort of more video conferencing apps versus something like YouTube Live.
Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then I think what we'll end off with is I really wanted to ask you about this remote control that you have, or this how you are sort of producing these live streams remotely from your computer or taking over a computer from a remote location.
Right. Well, I tried different ways. You can do it over Zoom, actually. When you share a screen, the other person that's watching the screen, you just click at the top and it says request remote control. And then the other person has to say yes, and that's it.
That's with a Zoom premium account, I should specify.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I didn't know I had that. I probably got it when this first started, but yes, if it's, and I think it's not that much. I think I pay less than $20 a month or something, hopefully. But that's a way that would work. If you don't want to make any investment, Google Chrome has a solution for that as well. Is Google Desktop Remote or Remote Desktop or something like that. And you basically send a link to the other person, and they generate a code. It's like an IT code that it's only usable for a certain amount of time or till the other person says no. So obviously there's a trust thing that needs to be established. I wouldn't recommend doing this with people that you haven't heard of, or because they're able to control your computer for a second. But yeah, Google Desktop works, and the one I'm using now is Zoho, which is also a paid service. But I find that it's the one that has the least lag or latency when I'm doing something. So then what I do is just watch the show that the person is playing, but while at the same time using Zoho to be controlling their computer. So I'm watching the show from my living room and mixing it on my laptop. Okay. Hearing it on my Neumann speakers, so that it's a bit better sounding than what people are going to have. But if they have home theaters and stuff, it at least gives me that low end, right? It's not just headphones or speakers from the computer.
Excellent. Well, as the final thought, what I would ask is, if I am a musician who has basically zero budget, but I have a laptop and I have a smartphone and an internet connection, what are the main things that I can do right now to improve my live stream?
Lighting, number one. Two, if you have multiple instruments and you still want to keep the one input, make sure that you do tests to see whether your guitar is overpowering the vocal, for example, and then MacGyver it into working, meaning that if you're using a guitar amp and it sounds too loud, for example, you might have to put it farther. But then when you put it farther, you record it and you see that now it sounds too far away. So you might have to get it closer but lower the volume, for example, right? So you have to start mixing with the air in order to not have to get more microphones. And then, yeah, if you're a Mac, get Loopback or try Black, what is it called again? I forget.
Black Hole?
Yeah, Black Hole. I find that the time spent trying to figure it out it's more, I find that $100 costs less than me, spending like 4 hours trying to figure something out, So depending on what you want to do, if you want to go that route, get it. If not, then yeah, try to connect your DAW so that you can do some more EQing and compression to your signal. and then yeah, have fun.
Guillermo, thank you so much for your time, for your knowledge and your expertise. For everyone who's watching on the chat, we have recorded this entire session, and I think there would be plans to make that available for people, so you can go back and reference the information here, because I know there was a lot of it. And we're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat, saying that it was very helpful, and I echo that as well. So thank you again for your time. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And please support your local musicians, support the live streams, watch them interact. And now more than ever, every musician in the city and in the world right now needs your energy and support. So thank you very much again, Guillermo, and everyone else. Have a wonderful evening and take care of each other.
My pleasure. Thank you.